Today we are doing a bit different. We are going to stay only in this venue. We're not going to do anything upstairs. And we are going to do two speeches as well, local speeches as well today. We're going to start with Joe Eames doing some talking about ECMAScript 6. And then we are going to do Philip and my other colleague Philip that will talk about how Unified Remote is, what tools Unified Remote is using to be able to handle multiple platforms and 4 million users at once and trying to understand what they actually want and need. Then we are going to get some food. We have that outside. There's also water all the time, so if you're thirsty, you can get some water outside. Then we are going to do two Google speeches or Google sessions. They are from yesterday, so some of you might have seen them already, but we do that for scheduling reasons. And the first one is next generation mobile web, and the second one is what's new in Android. And after that, we're going to have some prizes for the winner of our competition, as well as some beers and some ice creams and stuff like that. So hopefully that will, yeah, I'm getting there. And we're also back at the back. We have Dev showing off some Google Glass, some Nest and stuff, and at the end we're also going to give out like 140 Google Cardboards. So y'all will be able to get one. There should not be more than 140 in this room, so you will all get one. Yeah, so I hope you will enjoy this day as well. So I give this up to Joe, and he can start his session. Thank you.
Thanks. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. How's that? Better? All right. How's everybody doing? Awesome? Good. As some of you may know, my name, as he introduced me, thank you, Jacob, for that. My name's Joe Eames. I don't fault him for the lack of American pronunciation, because most people in America don't know how to say my last name right. So no big deal there. And just fiddling around with this to get this to show back up again. Oh, the cable came out. Look at that. Got tech support right here. I'll see if I can screw this in. No, it looked like there was. No, it's going to be wraparound job. Huh. I'm having fun up here. My phone is almost dead, so I wanted to charge it while I was talking, but we'll just have to leave it. So I'm used to speaking in the US, where the culture is a little bit different from here. Somebody warned me up front. Don't read that, that's nothing. Somebody warned me up front that in Scandinavia, people tend to be a little more introverted. Now, being in computers, everybody's introverted, so I didn't think it would be any big deal, but I came prepared. I did some research, wanted to know what the culture was like, and I discovered that it's quite a bit different from the different countries. Norway, Sweden, Copenhagen, or Denmark and Finland. There's a lot of differences, and apparently the people are most introverted in Finland. So as I was reading, I heard this joke, and maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. The joke goes, how do you tell, and you're gonna need some audience participation here, so you guys have to answer me back. How do you tell if somebody in Finland is an introvert, is an extrovert? And at this point you say, how? No. He's looking at your shoes and not his own. So I don't know if that's funny. Is that funny? All right. I need to do a little bit of arranging here to prepare what I'm going to be doing. And so what I'm going to be talking about is ECMAScript 6. Now, everybody here knows what ECMAScript is, right? ECMAScript is the official name for JavaScript. We all, how many people program in JavaScript at least 20% of the time? About a quarter of you. How many people program in JavaScript occasionally? A reasonable number. Okay. So for those of you who only program occasionally, you probably don't watch and pay attention a ton, but maybe you like to stay up to date. Apparently there's this thing where ECMAScript has now been renamed to, it's not ECMAScript 6 and ECMAScript 7 anymore. Now it's JavaScript 2015 and JavaScript 2016, which of course is a really stupid idea, because if you think that the people who know best how to name products is Microsoft, then you have a real problem. They're the only people that name things by years, products by years, and that's pretty stupid. So I'm going to still call it ECMAScript 6, and most people still do. But I guess in the future we'll be calling it JavaScript 2016. I hope that they change that. I prefer it, much prefer it the way that it is right now. So we work with ECMAScript 5 when we program in JavaScript. And in our projects, we write ECMAScript 5, and then we put it out to the web. It's becoming more and more popular to use ECMAScript 6. Why is that? Because finally, there's been this movement to fix JavaScript and to move it into the current century and deal with all the problems that it has. The problem with that is you cannot break the web, right? You cannot lose backwards compatibility. So we have all these browsers that our apps might need to go out to and work in, and they have to be compatible. We cannot send just the latest and greatest for the most part down, even if we are targeting only Chrome, which is very rare. But if we are targeting only Chrome or only Firefox, there's still very few features that don't require the user to turn a flag on or something like that. So it's been this problem, and people think, well, I'll just keep using ECMAScript 5. And ECMAScript 6, great idea. Whatever you're doing, I love it. Keep doing it, and then when it's supported in every browser that I target, then I'll consider looking at it. But imagine for a moment that you were using some horrible, terrible language. What's the worst language to program in the world? I like the answer back there, JavaScript, but PHP. I'm going to go with that because I don't know any PHP, so I feel like I can be biased against PHP. That's the key to being biased against something, right? Is that you know nothing about it. That's what makes you an expert and why it sucks. So let's say for a moment that you had this program in PHP and you hated it, and somebody told you you can program it. And now, what's the best language to program in? PHP. I'm going to skip that suggestion, and we'll go with Python. Let's assume that you love Python. You did Python at university, you do Python on your side projects, and when you want to compose sonnets to the love of your life, you use Python. And you want to program in Python, but you have to program in PHP. And somebody said to you, you don't have to actually write PHP. You can write Python, and it will just turn into PHP magically. Would you do it? Absolutely. Why not? Why use a crappy language when you can use an awesome language? Now, please, nobody tweet that I hate PHP. I'll alienate some of my friends. So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit, the most important thing I want to talk to you about is the fact that you can use ECMAScript 6 today, okay? And you will not break anything that you're doing, and no user that currently uses your app will not be able to use your app, okay? That's the most important thing, and if we have some time, I'm going to show you a couple of the cool things about ECMAScript 6 that make it worth using. But you can go out and you can Google ECMAScript 6 features and easily find what's awesome about ECMAScript 6. But I want to talk to you today about how easy my primary goal is to talk to you about how easy it is to use ES6 now and program in an ES6 Plus, ES7, JavaScript 2016, whatever they call it. How easy it is to use it today and be able to run your apps and not break them, okay? So that's my primary goal. So I'm going to show you two methods to do that. One that works well in the general case, and one that works well under certain circumstances, but I think works just a little bit better, which is why I like it and why I'm going to show it to you. So I'm going to talk to you about Gulp, and then after a minute, I'm going to talk to you about Webpack. And I'm going till 5:45, right, Jacob? Till 5:45. Do you want me to end it right at 5:45 sharp?
Go.
Just go till I get tired of speaking. All right. So everybody settle in. I hope you all brought a blanket and a pillow. All right. What I'm going to do is we're going to look at using Gulp. So I'm going to open up my console. All right. I'm over here and pay no attention to any of this. Okay. I'm in the root of my directory, and I want to use Gulp. And so it's very simple. Okay. I'm going to npm install. Oh, this is low, huh? Not everybody can see where I'm typing, right?
No.
So I'm going to move this up just a little bit and try to make this so that we can all see. Is that high enough?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. npm install gulp and gulp-babel. Don't call it Babel. It's Babel if you're American. If you're not American, call it anything you want. So this is all that I need to do to install, to be able to run my stuff with ECMAScript 6, and we'll do a little bit of configuration here. Of course, you have to have Node installed. If you don't have Node installed, then you really need to re-examine your life, because there's so much awesomeness in Node that you're missing out on. And that doesn't matter if you program a single thing in Node. So many awesome developer tools are in Node. So really, if you're not using Node now, it's time to go home and have a long conversation with God. Okay, I'm not going to run this command because I've already got this stuff installed, but that's all I need to do is to install these two pieces. I also need to make sure that gulp is installed globally. So after I run that, I would also install gulp globally with the -g flag. And so I do install gulp twice, once for my project and once globally. That's fine. Once I have that installed, I need to go and create a gulp file. And I think I already have one started. I'm going to go through this piece by piece, okay? So we start off with just a little bit of magicness. If you have no idea what's going on here at this top, these require statements, that's okay. You don't need to understand that. It's not important, okay? We just bring in the gulp library and the gulp babel library. Then we tell gulp that we want to create a task, and we can name the task whatever we want. I named it transpile because that's what we're going to do. We're going to take, and I'm going to try to make a conscious effort here to slow down my speaking on the off chance that I understand that every Swede speaks English better than I do. So I'm not too worried, but I'll make a conscious effort to slow down a little bit in case we don't have any, if we have somebody who isn't Swedish here in the room. I'll name it transpile, but I could name it whatever I want. I could name it compile or 625 or Sweden is awesome. I don't think I can use spaces, so we can't do that. Sorry. Transpile. Okay? And once I have a name, I pass in a callback function which does the work. And so I return out a call to gulp.source src reads files. So what I'm telling it here is read this file off the disk. And this is the JS file that I want it to read. And so this is my source file. Then I pipe it out or give the contents of that file to the Babel function, which is this right here. And so it's going to read that index.js, and it's going to pass it on to the Babel function and give the contents there. And then when it's done, I tell it, now write it out to the disk. And I just have to give it a directory name. So it's dist, which is this corresponds to this directory here. And it will just create corresponding files there for me. And I can give it, if I have more files than one, I can give it like a pattern like */star.js or things like that, and it will write them out for me. And there's lots of configuration options. Once you know how to do this, it's easy to look at Gulp's help and figure out what's perfect for your situation. But once I have this set, I go back out to my command line. Oh, and let's give ourselves a command. So here, I've got console.clear, but let's prove that we can use ECMAScript 6. Everybody knows that for those of you who paid any attention at all to ECMAScript 6, we know that there's a new let statement. Instead of var, we have let, which has better scoping. So if I do this, this is only valid in ECMAScript 6, NES6. So if I compile this, or transpile this, and I do this by doing gulp space transpile, then it's going to go into this dist directory, and it's transpiled or translated that into ES5. Very simple and easy. So what I've done is I'm able to write NES6, and my code runs NES5. So I'm writing in Python, and it's running in PHP, right? I don't have to write in the crummy version. I can write in the good version. So it's very simple. Now, of course, having to run it every time you make a change is a problem, which is why we do this. I created another task, and I named this one transpile-watch. I might, if I wanted to, name it just watch, whatever. And I told it, I want you to watch the following files, and I give it a file pattern. And when any of those files change, should I move this up a little bit so that people in the back, I see a little bit of, do you guys have this term prairie dogging? In America, we have the term prairie dogging. That's when you do this. Because there's this little animal called prairie dogs, and they live in holes, and they pop up, and they look around, and like a meerkat, right? We should call it meerkatting. Prairie dogging. I can see some prairie dogging, so I'm going to move this up. Is that good enough? Can everybody see the bottom of this right here? Yep, good, okay. Half my screen is completely unusable. That's fine. I've had worse demos. Okay, so I'm able to watch for changes in any of these files, and whenever any of them change, I run transpile. So save that, I go out to my command line, and I do gulp, watch, and you can see it starts up a process and it's still running. This is the magic of Node. Again, if you're not using Node, leave immediately and have a pray, whatever you need to do, whoever you need to talk to your significant other, your wife, your husband, and let them know you don't know gulp, or you're not using Node. They'll slap you, and then you can move on with life. Back to my file. This is my source file. So I don't want A to be 3 anymore. I want A to be Lund, right? Lund? Yes. Lund is, I don't know the Swedish word for awesome, but what? Awesome? All right, this is not a Swedish lesson, so I won't try to spell that. Grund? Groom? Like, groom. All right. So I changed it. Let's go and see our source. And look, it's already updated. Okay, this is the point where we clap. Yay. We're not clapping for me. That's okay. You can clap. We're clapping for Gulp. So this has nothing to do with me being the most amazing speaker you guys have ever seen. This has everything to do with Gulp being awesome. Okay? So all your source files, you write them in Python, and they transpile immediately to PHP, whatever the crummy thing is. So ES6 is great. You can write let now. And for those of you who didn't know what let is before, it's just a replacement for var. You're back there scratching your head saying, way to go. I don't care. But now you can use all the awesomeness that's in ECMAScript 6. So let's look at one other way to do this, which is a way that I like a little bit better, but it's harder to use with other frameworks. Like you have to use a module system. So if you're not using a module system, this doesn't work. This is called Webpack. Okay, Webpack is a really awesome product. It's very recent, and it's making Gulp and Grunt look like makes them look like PHP. Since we've already established that PHP is something nobody likes in this room, except for that guy, whoever said that PHP was awesome. So Webpack is making Gulp and Grunt look terrible because it's really slick, but you have to use a module system. So if you don't know what a module system is, you can zone out because you probably don't want to do the extra work to make Webpack work. If you happen to be using a module system, pay attention because Webpack is really cool. So to do Webpack, I'm going to end this task in Node. I have to install npm install Webpack, and then I also need loader-babel. So this is, remember I installed gulp-babel? That was the Babel for gulp. Loader-babel is the Babel for Webpack. And no, it's Babel-loader. Sorry. That's what I need. I need Babel-loader. So that's Babel for Webpack. And then I also get Webpack. And while I'm at it, I also, well, I'll get to this in just a quick second. So I install those, and again, I'm not going to do this because I've already done it. I also need to install Webpack globally with the -G. I'm not going to do this, even though I haven't done this, because I'm just going to move past this in my demo. But you also want it installed globally, okay? And this is going to feel very much like gulp. So if you've been paying attention to the part about gulp, you'll see that this is very similar. I go into my source code, and I go and I create a Webpack config.js. And I can't click on it. There we go. Webpack config.js. And this is a little bit similar to the gulp file because we bring in Webpack using this require statement. And then we have this module.exports. So the syntax is a little bit different, but you'll see that things are relatively similar. We got the similar concepts. We have an entry point, and we have an output. So we got the files that are going to be getting transpiled as our source, and then we've got where we're going to. In this case, I'm putting it out to bundle.js, which is going to be in the same directory as my source index.js. And then I have to, so remember what grunt or gulp was? Gulp was a task runner, meaning that gulp will do really anything that you care to write a plugin for. So in addition to translating files, it'll also run my tests. I can get it to go in and take a directory of files and delete them all, or open up a port. I can have it open up a port to some web server and do posts. Gulp will do anything. It's just a task runner. Any task that I can do in Node, I can have gulp help me automate and make it easier on me. Webpack is different. It's very focused. Its entire job and goal, and the thing that it does is it just simply transforms files from one format to another. Okay? It brings in a file or a set of files, and it outputs one file that is some result of running an operation on those files. That's all it does. Okay? It won't do everything. It's not as generic and versatile as gulp is. And I showed you gulp. There's another product called Grunt that's very similar to gulp. And the only difference between the two is flavors. Webpack is very focused. It only does this transformation. So you can see that I'm not able to just create tasks. Instead, I give it loaders, and each loader says for a specific kind of file, in this case, a .js, and this is a regular expression in JavaScript. For those of you who may not be that familiar with JavaScript, this is how we do regular expressions in JavaScript. So I'm saying any file that ends with .js, then I want you to use the Babel loader, and don't do it on any files that are in the node modules directory. So that's all this does. So Webpack says, I just loaded up a file. What extension does it have? And then that tells me, and then it looks in here in my loaders list and knows what loaders to run it through. So right now, it's for all JavaScript files, it's going to run them through the Babel loader. And the Babel loader knows what to do, okay? So what's different about this, which is very subtle, is the fact that this only has one entry point. I can't give it a list of files. I can only give it one file. And that's where the module loader system comes into place. And that means that my entry file, if I use other files, then my entry point has to point at the other files itself. And that's what the module loaders do. So who here uses a server-side language that has something like an import statement or an include, right? So you have one, or who here has used something like C#, Java, right? Who's used something like that? You're familiar with this idea. If I'm in a file in C# or Java and I want to use a library from somewhere else, I have to import it. I can't just start using things that aren't in this file. I have to import that first. So that's what those are called. That's essentially a module system, and we're not used to that in JavaScript. It's very rare. Webpack relies on this. So my index file must point at any other file that is used in my application. If it does not, Webpack cannot do anything with it. So that's what's different about Webpack, which means that there's more work, but a lot of people are already using module systems, so it's not a big deal. Or people realize there's value in that because it means that it eliminates a lot of the global variableness that is inherent in JavaScript. It's so easy in JavaScript to create a global variable just by the way that you write a variable in JavaScript. If you write a variable the wrong way, it will be global. But using a module system, it won't be. So that's not particularly important, other than to understand that Webpack requires a module system. So if you happen to be using a module system, it's great. If you don't, you either have to move to one or use gulp. Webpack is very popular in the React world, but it's way less popular in with Angular, things like that. Especially with Angular, you have to kind of do jump through a couple little hoops. You just have to understand a few things to make Angular work correct, but it's not particularly difficult. So again, I have one entry point, and this file is the main file for my JavaScript, and every other file must be branched off from that. And then it will crawl that entire tree. It'll start at index and say index points at this file, and then it'll go to that one, and it'll say index points at this other file, and go to that one, and go through them all, bring them all in, and create one file out of all of them called bundle.js. All right, and I can do the same thing with gulp if I wanted, but this is just a lot slicker. So it's already optimized, and what's really nice about Webpack is it has this really cool tool. So if I do npm install webpack -dev -server, okay, and I install that both locally, and then after I've done that, I also install it globally. Then I get this really cool tool called webpack dev server. Did anybody need me to leave that command up? It's not important that you particularly take notes. I just want you guys to understand what can be done, because a little bit of Googling will show you how to do what I'm showing you. But I want you to understand how easy this is. Okay, so once we have the Webpack dev server installed on our box, I can go in and run this command. Let me just make sure I type this correctly. Webpack -dev -server -content -base app. So that's /app. Let me see if I can make this a little bit wider so it doesn't wrap. Okay. So I run this magic command, and because it's a little bit long, I prefer instead to go into my package.json file and create this script called start and just put the command in there. And so instead of writing the command out that way, I can just do npm start. And once I run this, it will run that command. And this Webpack dev server is very cool, and I'll show you what it does. Okay. This is running, and you can see I've got this little message console was cleared, right? So if I go back to my source, and I go over into that index file, and I've got this variable a, and I log it out to the console. And I saved it, and I go back. It's automatically refreshed my page and run all the code for me. So it takes an extra step from gulp. Gulp just watched it and recompiled or retranspiled things. Webpack, through this Webpack dev server, will not only watch it and retranspile it, it'll reload my page. And so there's an iframe here inside of right underneath here, and this part is the Webpack dev server. So the iframe is actually watching this, and I can have a full web app, and I can browse around and log in and all that sort of stuff, and it'll run just fine, but it'll automatically reload at the same spot where I'm at. So there are other tools that do this, browser watching tools that'll do this, but Webpack's got it just kind of built in. So it's a really cool little tool, especially when you're starting out. As you get a bigger project, you tend to not use this anymore, and you just got your web project running and you recompile or you have it watching, because it's still watching and recompiling that bundle.js. So you just have Webpack Dev Server recompile it automatically for you, and then you just go to your web browser and refresh and maybe log back in if you have to. So this is a really cool little service, especially for smaller projects or projects that are starting out. It could work with a larger project, but probably not, because you probably don't want this extra Chrome showing up. So let me move this over. I'm going to full screen that. Okay, so we are at 536. So that's Webpack and Gulp. And there's another tool called Grunt, very similar to Gulp. All of these, it took me, if you Google it and you have no idea how to use them, it might take you an hour to set them up. If you have a super complex existing build and process, it might take you an hour and a half to set this up. But it really could take you 10 minutes to get this set up and running if you already know, are familiar enough with Node and saw what I was doing and just know the right things to Google and find a quick blog post that shows you how to do this. You can have a build set up in 5 minutes and immediately begin to author in ECMAScript 6 and ES6 and have it automatically transpile out to ES5 and write all your code in the new hotness that is ES6 and have it run on every browser that your app's already running at. So that is running ES6 today. So I'm going to move on, and we're going to talk about there'll be a time here just for a couple of small things about what is awesome in ES6. All right, so I'm going to that's not what I want. I'm going to go down here. I'm just going to scroll down. All right, we already showed what let was. Lame, who cares? So there's another thing. All right, let's say that I've got a list of Star Wars actors, the 3 big ones, Luke, Leia, and Han, right? And I happen to know their current ages, which is incredibly depressing to see. I looked that up. And let's say that I want to know, I want not a list, this is an array of objects. I don't want an array of objects. I want an array of just their names, okay? I can use the map function in JavaScript. So I'm going to map this out. Oh, I'm redefining A. So go back down. I'm going to log out to the console this new array that I've mapped using the map function. I've converted it from an array of objects to an array of names. So if I go back to my browser, you'll see it's automatically listed that out. I've got an array of just the names. Very nice. But see how there's a lot of ceremony going on there just to do a very simple job. So I'm going to comment this out, but leave it up on the screen if I can. On here. Okay. And comment this back in and see if I can bring it on the screen. Okay. This is the fat arrow function. That's not the official name. It's just the colloquial name. So maybe that's offensive to people like me. This is the fat arrow function is a very quick way to declare a function. And it has an implicit, there's 2 things that are interesting about it. It has an implicit return statement. So this part from here to here, right, is completely identical from here to there, right? So that's all identical. So we're only talking about a difference from this part right here to this point here. That's what's different. And that has become this, right? So I said I need a function that takes in a parameter called actor. And that function will simply return out actor.name. And there's an implicit return in this. So I don't even have to add the return statement. And if I do that and save, then I've still got my array of the names of the Star Wars actors. So far more succinct, but just as descriptive. It's not verbose at all. It's very clear, but it's also clear. It's easy to see what's going on once you understand a little bit about the fat arrow. So it's easy to see that, hey, I'm doing exactly what I had to, it took me 3 lines to do, or if I inlined this, it would take me, a whole bunch of extra characters. I can do this in a lot fewer fewer statements. Now, once you get to, if you're going to create a big function with like 10 lines of code, it probably doesn't make as much sense anymore, or even three lines of code. But when you're doing these small functions, it's really nice to use this fat arrow. And let's say, for example, what we really needed to know, excuse me, sorry, that's probably very loud, is the total ages of all of the Star Wars actors. We can use reduce, and we can find out. See, so here we got reduce, and to write this reduce statement in actually out using the long function is, again, a whole bunch of extra code. But here it's very simple, assuming you understand how reduce works. It's very simple to read what's going on. That we have a previous value, we have our current item, we take the previous value, we add the current item's age, we initialized it to a value of 0, and what we get out is 193. Between the 3 actors, there's 193 years of age in there, which is extremely, I think this whole entire room is probably less than that. So yes, they are very old. That's the fat arrow. Super quick thing to learn, but quite useful in the few circumstances where you have to do very small little functions, 1 or 2 line functions to do a few little things. If I needed a second line, I could either add another line, or I can just put in semicolons and put another line. If I needed to do one other statement here, I could add another line of code. No problem there. All right, let's look now at how to do classes. Class is another thing that's going to matter. Does anybody here work in Angular? I have a few. All right, for those of you who work in Angular, ES6 is going to matter because Angular 2 is very heavily influenced by ES6 and uses a lot of ES6. So you're going to want to, if anything, a lot of the examples are going to be in ES6. In JavaScript, we have the ability to create classes. Okay, and this is how we create them. They are a real pain. Let me uncomment this so we can work with this code. I'm creating a student class, and it takes in 3 parameters: the name, the age, and a Boolean flag as to whether or not they're enrolled, and then saves that data into local variables, right? So we got a little constructor function, and now I want to also give that student class a register function. How do I do that? I've got to go student.prototype.register. So what really sucks about this is this is an entirely separate block of code, right? My class, every time I needed to add another function to my class, it's a separate block that has nothing to do with the initial block that is the actual class itself. The student class is the class, but my register function is entirely separate. In fact, because of this, it's possible for me to add a function to my student class any place where the student functions is in scope. So I could do it in another file. I could do it in a file in a different directory. I could do it anywhere in my program. I could add more methods to this class, which is obviously kind of a bit of an anti-pattern. Even for languages that do support this, you rarely do it. It's just bad practice. You want the methods for the class to be long there with the class. And in JavaScript, you have to do that by convention. Well, we've got to stick it right next to it so that people can see where the methods are, right? It's very, very crummy code. So let's look at how to do this with ECMAScript 6 classes. And for those of you that use any kind of a class-based language, you're going to look at this and say, well, duh. Have to delete this. All right, so take this out and I comment this. Here is our student class. Let me delete a couple of lines of code here to try to get this all on one line. I threw in some sample code, but it's kind of unimportant. Okay. So there's my student class, and I've got the constructor function, which is actually just named constructor, and it can do whatever the constructor function needs to do, and then any methods, I can just do like this. I don't even have to do like function keyword. I just name the method, give it its parameter, and tell it what to do. So much better syntax than this. Even though it's not necessarily less lines of code, it's still significantly better syntax and leads to lots better use of code. So there's classes, very simple. I'm going to comment these out. Oops. I'm going to comment these out because we don't need them. And we're going to look at one more thing before we're done. We're going to look at the new default parameters. Okay, so let's assume this is going to be, this is quiz time. There's no prize for this. But if you absolutely need a prize, whoever can answer this correctly will get a hug from Jacob. All right, I've got a student class. Okay, I've got this default enrolled value that's set to true. And every time a student is created, let's say I've got the system and we create students occasionally, and students they either are or are not enrolled in my school. Now, since in the vast majority of cases, students are always enrolled because there's no reason for me to worry about tracking the student in my system if they're not enrolled. We only support the enrolled Boolean variable in case later on they become unenrolled, but they don't by default come into the system enrolled. So we made it so that you don't have to, when you create a student, I can say var new student equals new student and pass in just the name. And I don't have to pass in the enrolled variable because they're just by default, they're all enrolled, okay? I just supported that as a parameter just in the off chance I wanted to specify. Then later on, it comes time to make a student that's enrolled and pass in an explicit value. But I did want to support this, but by default, they're all automatically enrolled. So we use the default. We got this little code here that says the enrolled value is equal to either this parameter, or if it's not present, use the default enrolled value, which is set to true. Can anybody in the room tell me the logic error in this code? This is a hug from Jacob. So big prize here. I noticed that Jacob ran away as soon as I mentioned something. What?
Not sure, but if the constructor is assigned already.
Nope.
Use the default value as false.
You got it. So just because of the way that JavaScript works, if I create this new student and pass in, get rid of that, and pass in an explicit value of false, what will happen is it will come into this code and enrolled, the parameter is false, and it will say this dot enrolled equals either false or the default enrolled. I cannot pass in a falsy value. In JavaScript, there's this concepts of falsy and truthy, right? I cannot pass in a faulty value because if it is falsy, it will use this. If I don't pass in a value, it uses this undefined value, which is implicitly false. So this code works when this is undefined, when I don't pass in a value, or if I pass in an explicit undefined, but I can't pass in an explicit false. I can't pass in an explicit empty string or null. All these values are falsy. So this is the problem with using this format for default parameters in JavaScript, or defaults in JavaScript. And this is all we have in JavaScript. And so since I can't use that, I've got to do like if enrolled is undefined, right? And add this big long if block to handle this. And I can't use this little succinct line of code. But this is so common, people use this by default everywhere. And it creates a logic error when you actually need a faulty value to come in over here. So there's a much better way to do this. We can create a default parameter. In ECMAScript 6, we could not do this in ES5. We can now do this in ES6. Enrolled equals default enrolled. And notice I don't even have to use like a literal value. I can use a variable in here. And if I do that, then this now, let me log out to the console. I'm going to toString this. And we see Joe is not enrolled. When we were using the old syntax, then this would have been, no matter what we passed in, this would always be the value of enrolled. So this is how to use default parameters a very common use case, a need in coding, is especially in JavaScript, because we are in the habit of having lots of parameters. We only use the extra parameters in more unusual cases, less common cases. So it's very often that we use default values in JavaScript, and we normally use that whole or syntax. And now we can actually use a nice expressive default parameter syntax. Very awesome, very needed thing. It's taken forever to get it in. It's now in the language. If you're not transpiling your code, then you are stuck without the ability to do something like this. Something as simple as using a default value. Something as simple as having a class, right? Something as simple as the let statement. For those of you who don't understand the let statement, in every other language, right? If I have in here, if, this dot name happens to equal Joe, then of course this dot grade equals, is 12 A? Is that common up here? I know that's how it works in Denmark. 12 is A, but Joe obviously is all A's, right? And if I needed a variable in here for some reason, right? I want to create var, default grade equals A, and then I maybe looped through. This grades was an array, so for let's see, grades, this dot grades dot for each, right? And I was going to go into here and set all my grades to A. I'd create this var default grade. Well, guess what? This bad boy is scoped actually up here. It's visible outside of the if, and in just about every other language, we don't have to deal with that problem that if we create a var inside of an if, it's visible outside the if. But that's the way the JavaScript works. It only has function scoping until let came along. Oops. And now that let is available, So these simple things that we could not use before with ES5, our hands were tied. Now this is available in ES6, and it's all because we can transpile our code. So it's just a taste of all the cool things that are in ES6. It has cool new data structures and module systems and different cool ways to fiddle around with other ways to work with parameters and lots of cool things. And you can use all these features only if you're transpiling your code, because really the support in browsers is nil. Even current modern day browsers, they have very limited support, and so you can't rely even on current modern day browsers to support your code. But you can transpile that code down to ES5 and run it everywhere that you're running your current stuff, unless you happen to be targeting IE8, in which case, God bless you, and I admire you, and my hat's off to you, and please don't offer me your job. If you're doing IE8, there's a more limited set of syntax you can use, so you have some other problems. But at least if you're targeting IE9 and above, you can use all of ECMAScript 5, and so you can transpile your code from ES6 to ES5. Much slicker, much easier, and once you get used to it, it literally takes 5 minutes to set up that transpile and have it just run automatically whenever you're doing your coding. Very easy. You can throw it into your CI system. You can throw it into your build. Very simple to do. Just a node command line run. So the lesson today is, if you are writing any JavaScript, when you do write JavaScript, throw a transpiler on, turn one on, and write your code in ES6 and use all the features of ES6 today. There's no reason not to. You're not gaining anything by not doing it, and you gain a lot by doing it. So please do that, and that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Joe. Is anyone going to start transcompiling their JavaScript now? I have a few. That's good. And the hug could just find me during the event, and you'll get your hug, I guess. Now it's time for Unified Remote to present how they are what tools they are using for building a successful app. So Philip will get the mic.